Music training also involves memory, so the memorization of sound and visual patterns, auditory motor sequences. To tune your instrument, you've got to remember the note to tune your instrument. If you have a musical idea and I'm going to improvise on it, I got to remember what your idea was. So all of this exercises auditory working memory. If you're making any sense of what I'm saying to you right now, it's because you can remember what I just said to you a few seconds ago to make sense of what I'm saying to you right now. Auditory working memory is absolutely crucial for language, for communication, for interaction. And again, if you just take standardized tests of auditory working memory, musicians outperform non-musicians across the lifespan. So rhythm, banging on the drum. Turns out rhythm is very obvious in music. Turns out to be very, very important for language as well. And because it marks where meaning stops and starts, where emphasis is, it enables us to predict and anticipate what people are saying, important for conversational turn-taking. Turns out that the very simple ability to tap along to a beat, to follow a beat, tracks with language skills. People have shown this now. There's converging evidence showing this again and again. It turns out that this ability to predict, you're coordinating your auditory and your motor system. This tracks with brain function. You can just see it in the brain's response. A lot of the work that we do is done in a laboratory, but we wanted to take our work outside of the laboratory and into schools. And it was Margaret and her counterparts in the Chicagoland area who came to me and said, you know, our kids who are playing music, they're just doing better in school. They are better learners. What's going on in their brains? And so we aim to find out. And what's important to know is that these both are in low-income areas. And kids who grow up in poverty, linguistic deprivation is something that is characteristic often of kids who grow up in poverty. Especially it is linked with maternal education. So kids whose moms have less education, typically the kids hear 30 million fewer words by the time they're 5 than the kids whose moms have more education. And what we were able to do is to look at our Chicago high school kids, and we divided them simply based on their mom's education. These are kids educated in the same classroom. And what we found was that the kids whose moms had less education, these are kids who had just more neural noise. In the absence of sound, there was just noise in their brains. Whereas the kids who are likely to have had more linguistic enrichment, these are kids who had stronger responses to sound. And again, the kids whose moms had less education had a signal that was just, well, it's as though, the analogy that works for me is as though you're listening to the radio, there's static in the background, and then the announcer's voice is not coming through very clearly, so the announcer's voice is muffled. So what we did in the Harmony Project is, we wanted to we looked at brain's responses, and we wanted to see how does this track with language development. The kids from low-income areas, their reading scores, we know that the achievement gap drops, and so from 2nd to 3rd grade, the kids who did not have music, their reading scores got worse, but the kids who had music in the Harmony Project, they stayed steady with their national average. For hearing, speech, and noise, this took 2 years. After 2 years, we saw that the kids who had the music classes, their ability to hear speech and noise was simply better. When we measured brain responses to sound, both the fast and the slow elements of sound, automatically the kids who were engaged in, this was in the Chicago cohort, who were engaged in music classes, their brains were just able to pick out the important elements of sound automatically and better than kids who had another form of activity. And these, again, were kids educated in the same classrooms otherwise. And the kids in band, their reading scores were simply better. A very important part of the message is that this is not a quick fix. After 1 year, neither in the Chicago adolescents nor in the LA elementary school, we saw no changes in the brain. It took 2 years. And also, the kids who were most engaged, it takes active engagement. You're not going to get it from music appreciation. It was the kids who practiced and practiced a lot and showed up. Those are the kids whose brains showed the most impact of the music education. Summing up then, making music strengthens the brain for language. We can see this objectively, and it takes time. It's not a quick fix. And I like to say that biologically, we are what we do, which really gives us a lot of responsibility for the choices that we make for ourselves, for our children, for our kids educationally. And biologically also, our past shapes our present. Thank you.